The journey is the reward, one foot in front of the other. If I think about where I'm trying to get to, if I'm thinking about the pot of gold, so to speak, I get overwhelmed because it seems unobtainable. But if I just focus on what is the next thing that I need to do, what is the next right thing that I need to do, then I'm in the process.
Hello, everyone. I am Melissa Forziat of Take the Doughnut, here to help you get inspiration and get donuts. I'm a motivational keynote speaker, and today I'm bringing you a Take the Doughnut interview with the one and only Michael Showalter, who is a writer, director, and the founder of Semi-Formal Productions, which has produced movies such as The Idea of You and the upcoming movies Oh, What Fun, starring Michelle Pfeiffer, and an adaptation of Colleen Hoover's Verity, starring Anne Hathaway, Dakota Johnson, and Josh Hartnett. Welcome, Michael.
Hello,
I'm
nice
so
to see
ex
you.
I'm so excited to talk with you. And what I didn't mention in that bio is we both went to Brown University. So that is a common connection that we have, and that's how we know each other today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Go,
so
go, go, Bruno.
exactly, ever true, as they say. So I am so excited to talk with you. We're going to talk a little bit about your life and what you think about going after opportunities. But first, I have to ask, what's your favorite donut?
Oh wow. I'm pretty old school. I like a nice sugared donut. I'll do a chocolate covered donut. I like a jelly donut. I don't get too fancy. I'm old school,
That's great, but you have options. So there's always something for you in any
but I do
case.
love a donut.
Perfect. Well, you've come to the right place. I said just a little bit about you up front, but tell us more about yourself. What should we know about you?
Um, I mean, I'm from Princeton, New Jersey. I grew up in Princeton. Parents are both college professors, so I was a faculty kid. And kind of discovered uh, at a relatively young age that I had a passion for comedy and the performing arts and movies and TV and that kind of a thing. Um, Went to Brown and got really into acting and theater. Was really active in the theater program at Brown. Was at the in the improv group at Brown. And then after college, stayed doing comedy and stayed doing entertainment world stuff and worked at MTV for a long time in the 90s and then had kind of a twisty, turny path towards the most recent chapter in my career and life has been directing movies and producing movies and have had some really great experiences with that. Uh, Directed the Big Sick, directed Jessica Chastain and The Eyes of Tammy Faye, for which she won an Oscar. Directed the Dropout, which was the true story, or based on the Elizabeth Holmes story, and worked with Amanda Seyfried, and she won an award for that. So I've had some pretty cool experiences, and live in Los Angeles. I have a family, a couple of children, and my wife Kaylin, and we have some very cute dogs, and no complaints.
I mean, what a wonderful summary. And it's so interesting that it seems like you you honed in really early on the industry that you wanted to be in, but you found a way to participate in all kinds of different directions
Yeah,
since then. So it's kind of like you've done a little bit of everything in the industry, it seems like from your
definitely,
description.
definitely. I growing up in Princeton, I never considered that I would have a career that I would actually make things. It was more like I could maybe be a cinema studies professor or something like that. Like the family business is to be an academic, and so when I went to college, I was thinking I could maybe write about film and be a film critic or a cinema studies professor or both. Um, and but when I went and visited my sisters, when I went and visited my sister in college and I saw the improv group there, I said, well, that's one thing I know I want to do when I get to school is I want to be in an improv group or be in a comedy group. And that really was the like thing that set my whole life off in a different direction, was being in a comedy group. I went to NYU actually my freshman year of college. So I actually transferred to Brown. I was at NYU for 1 year and then I transferred to Brown. And it was doing sketch comedy and improv comedy that really changed the course of my, my path. But yeah, I've been a writer, I've been an actor, I've been a director, I've done producing. And when I first was in my comedy group, we were called The State. We were on MTV and we were doing everything. We were doing costumes, we were doing locations, we were doing, we were holding the microphone, like we did it all. So I've definitely had a long education in this business that I'm in. And it's been kind of a crazy journey.
Well, I'm sure we'll delve into it more along the way here, but first, let me hit the reset button for those who've never seen a Take the Doughnut interview before. So, what we're doing here, so I have an expression called take the donut, which is another way to say carpe diem. It's all about going after the things that you want in life. And it actually comes from this strange thing that happened to me at Brown, where I left an actual donut on a table, but it became an object lesson for me and what it looks like to leave opportunities behind. So I don't want to do that anymore. I want to take the donut. So this conversation actually is all about going after opportunities, going after goals, and what that looks like day to day, practically speaking. And I think you are an especially interesting person to talk about that with, because I know from improv, the whole yes and concept probably means that you've been seizing opportunities, with an adaptability about it that probably took you on a journey that you didn't expect. So let me ask this question to get us going. How are you with going after goals? What's that process like for you?
It's interesting because, especially in this industry, there's a lot of frustration and rejection. I was an actor, or at least I was trying to be an actor. And even though I have done some things that people recognize me for and sort of achieved some amount of, I guess you could call it success, it didn't really feel like that to me because I wasn't earning a living as an actor, not even close. And auditioning, I had an agent, which was a big deal and all of that stuff. And I auditioned for, so many things and you're just constantly getting rejected. You're constantly not getting the part. Or you are, as a writer or director, looking for people to give you an opportunity and constantly coming up against a wall. There's a saying in this industry, which is, if in the entertainment industry, if you have a fallback plan, you will fall back to it. So probably the only reason that I stuck it out and finally figured out a way to kind of make a career out of this is because I really had no fallback plan. There was nothing else I was going to be able to do. Although that's not quite true. My fallback plan ultimately was to be a teacher. And so in the early part of the 2000s, I actually was teaching screenwriting at NYU. It sort of all came full circle, and I was at the graduate school at NYU teaching screenwriting, and that was my fallback plan. But I just I have a lot of ambition, and a really strong desire to achieve my potential. And I wanted to have a career that I really wanted to get to a place where my career could be something that was an everyday thing, that it wasn't about me striving to get somewhere, like I'm just trying to get in the room, kind of. That took a long time, but that I'm in the room now. Now I'm in the room, and now I want to get better at my craft, and I want to really devote my life to this thing that I've chosen. And so for me, that was a lot of struggle, a lot of frustration, and a lot of work, but also a lot of trial and error. And people ask me for advice, and oftentimes, especially with something like this, there's no one path for this. But what I say is just work hard, be the hardest worker. Be teachable. Always be teachable. Be that person who doesn't think they already know how to do everything. And when I was teaching at NYU, my best students were also the most teachable. It's interesting. The most talented students in my class were also the ones that were the most open to critique and to seeing things in a different way. And truthfully, I wasn't like that when I was a student. I wasn't like that, and so I learned from them. And so be teachable and humble. It's cliche, but I really do believe that like the journey is the reward. You cannot do something and only be in it for the result. You have to be in it for the journey towards a goal. And if you're not enjoying that journey, and if you're not finding some kind of joy or value in that journey, for me, that would have been very hard, because I actually love what I do, whether I get paid for it or not.
Well, you touched on a few different things across the course of that answer, but one thing that I want to drill down on a little bit here is this idea of when things are hard, when things, when it's going to take a while to get where you need to get, whatever that's going to look like in the end, what keeps you motivated? And I know you sort of touched on some of the things. I think there's a mindset that you have that is part of that for you, but if you could pinpoint what keeps you motivated, what would that be?
For me, the example might be writing a screenplay. So like the big kind of break for me, if you want to call it that, was a movie that I wrote and directed called Hello, My Name is Doris, which stars Sally Field, and was a very low budget film, but was very well received and actually was very profitable. And so it was kind of my first breakthrough, and it happened when I was in my 40s. I mean, I'd had other successes, but that was my current phase of my career and what I really wanted. That was a really big moment for me. And for years, I worked on that script with no sense of if it was ever going to get produced. And so, in fact, we wrote the screenplay, and we took it around all the different financiers and studios and what have you, and none of them wanted to make the movie. It's about the main character is a woman of a certain age, and no one saw what I saw. And I think that, like I said, I think for me, in that period of time, I very much believe in this idea that like the journey is the reward. The moment is doing the work is the point, and you cannot control the outcome. All you can control is your part of it. And so my part of it is I'm going to do my best possible work, and that means being rigorously honest with myself about what I'm good at, what I'm not good at. And I have to let go of the result, and I have to be patient, and I have to just know that what allows me to go to sleep at night and look at myself in the mirror is to know that I left it all out on the field, to use another cliche, is that I have no regrets about my part of this. And that's kind of a philosophy that I have in general, which is you want to leave it all out on the field. You don't want to look back at it and say, oh man, if I'd only done this, or if I'd only done that, everything could have been different. You want to know that I did everything that I could have done to do this thing, and the rest of it's not in my control, and to make peace with that. And for me, like I said, I mean, I was 44, 45 years old when Doris happened, and I'd been doing this for a long time before that. And it wasn't until that my career, I really saw things change in my career. The Big Sick was what came after that. And then that really opened up the floodgates for me to have the kind of career that I think I'd always wanted. But I feel like I earned it. And I
Yeah.
feel like I didn't cut any corners. And those are things that are really important to me.
Hmm. When it comes to going after things we want, you've certainly been painting the picture that challenges come up, obstacles come in our way as we aim towards what we want. For you, is there a specific brand of challenge that even now, every time you go after something, you can expect this type of challenge to rear its head?
The hardest thing for me is that it's a sort of a kind of a paradox, or maybe an irony. I suppose maybe irony is the right word for it. That I am very thin-skinned about what other people think of my work. Being reviewed, doing screenings and having audience members talk about the movie that I've done and critiquing it. That's a big part of what I do. Is you put your work in front of an audience and they give you feedback. And a lot of times, in order to make the best product, you're asking them to give you negative feedback so that you know what needs to be fixed. And this is that part about being teachable. And my ego is always, on the chopping block, and it's excruciating, especially getting reviews. And I feel like I've been fortunate enough to, a lot of the things that I've done have been very well reviewed. But of course, I always focus on the negative reviews. A good review for me is just a bullet dodged. So like a good review is just, thank God it wasn't a bad review. And then a bad review is traumatizing. And the irony is that I keep putting myself in front of people to have them say those things about me. So, and that I don't choose subject matter that's safe. And so it's interesting that I would have such an aversion to being judged, but would also my whole life put myself in front of people to be judged.
I'm just, as you were answering that, I was just sitting here thinking about my feelings about the show, The Dropout, and how you must have been like holding your breath when reviews came in because it's such a controversial figure, but such a good show. Like you
Yeah,
don't do easy material.
no, I
So
don't.
it's,
And I mean,
wow.
and again, at the time that we made The Big Sick, there were no movies. There were no movies like that getting made about that kind of a subject matter. Uh, I made a movie called Spoiler Alert, which is about a relationship between two men. One of them dies. It's really sad. I'm interested in. I wanna take risks. I want to take risks, and so part of the one of the realities of taking risks is that when you take those risks, you put yourself up for, you putting yourself up in front of people to have them have big, strong opinions about it. And that's something that I'll probably be trying to figure out how to deal with my whole life. I still haven't figured it out. And everything I've done from the very first, from when I was right out of college and I had a show on MTV and we got negative reviews. And then I made a movie called Wet Hot American Summer and it got negative reviews. And then I had a TV show called Stella and it got negative reviews. My first movie, The Baxter, got negative reviews. And all of those are things that I thought were really good. I still think they're really good. And, I don't think that they were deserving of that. And there's a part of you that wants to lash out, that wants to, say things about it. But I just have to let go of those
Mhm.
things and try to just focus on what I can control, because I can't control what people say. I can only control my part.
What a powerful thing for you to say. I know there are a lot of people who probably deal with this, but maybe in a much less public way. So, to hear it from you, I think is important. When you think back on your life, what would you say is the biggest donut you've taken? That can be the biggest thing you've said yes to, biggest opportunity that came your way. What jumps out for you?
Hmm. Um, I made a really big decision in my 30s. And I don't know, is your audience like brown grads in their 30s? Like who are
It
your
could
audience?
be
Anybody.
anybody.
When I was in my 30s, I had sort of achieved a certain level of I had sort of I had had a kind of a version of a career already. I had done this sketch comedy show on MTV that was successful, that led to other things. I was living in New York. I'd been in New York for a long time, and I just wasn't happy. It wasn't working for me. As I said, it was like I was sort of semi-famous. I could be recognized on the subway, but I didn't feel like it was fulfilling to me. It was certainly wasn't paying the rent. But it also wasn't creatively fulfilling to me and artistically fulfilling to me. And I made a decision in my mid 30s that I would rather do something else than sort of skim along the surface of this other thing, even though a lot of people might have looked at where I was and said, "You're doing great. I don't see what the problem is." And so I really downscaled. I sort of stopped. I sort of gave up entirely on the notion of that I was going to be an actor. Like I just stopped. I stopped auditioning. I stopped thinking of myself that way, and that was very liberating, to be honest. And I took this teaching job at NYU, teaching screenwriting, which I loved. It wasn't a good. It wasn't. You don't make a lot of money as an adjunct professor at NYU. You don't make a lot of money, but it gave me a lot of self-esteem. It gave me a sense of purpose and that I was participating in the world and not just trying to, book a commercial voiceover or something like for dog litter or something, cat litter. And then I was working with a writer who I'm still working with, actually going to see later today. Her name is Christina Lee. And we had been writing some things together, and we realized that in order to get to the next level in what we were doing, which was to try to get a TV show, you needed to work from the inside out. You needed to be a staff writer on a show, and you needed to show that you know how the system works, you know how the infrastructure works, and that you have experience doing this thing so that you could be seen as someone that could have their own show one day, and that wasn't something that was going to happen overnight. That was something that could be many years before. Like that could be like for the next 5 years, all I'm going to do is just be a writer in a writer's room, and hopefully do a good job at that and slowly climb up the ranks, which to other people would have said, but you've already done that. You've already climbed up the ranks. But I knew that for me, that wasn't true. And by the way, there was no guarantee that I was going to be able to get that job either. It wasn't like I could just say, hey, I want to get a writing job on a TV show. That was something else that I had to go for that. I had to interview for that and put together a writing samples and all of those things. And there were certainly no guarantees. And we were hired to be on a sitcom. It was called Super Fun Night, starring Rebel Wilson. And it was like we got hired on a Tuesday, and it was like this job starts in a week, and we're in LA. And so both Christina and I, who were both married, we both packed up our lives and we moved out to Los Angeles. So my wife and I flew, and Christina drove my car with her fiance, and that was like 11 years ago. And when I showed up for work, all the other writers were like, "Why are you here?" I wasn't a senior writer. I wasn't the highest ranking person in that writer's room. I was a mid-level, just a mid-level writer on a sitcom. And all the other writers in that room knew who I was. I was the guy that wrote Wet Hot American Summer. I was the guy that had been, who was kind of have achieved some real things in this industry already. And they're going, "What are you doing here?" But I needed to do that. I needed to reset. and I needed to come at it a different way in order to achieve what I was trying to achieve, not what was available to me, because they're different. What was available to me wasn't what I wanted. And in order to get what I wanted, I needed to make some really, really big changes. And I did. And so maybe that's the donut.
That sounds like it for sure. I mean, I think there's
And
maybe more than one in there too.
It's not easy. It's humbling, and it's uncomfortable, and it's scary. But again, for me, the thing that I wanted is I want to feel like I have a career that I'm immersed in it, that I'm immersed in the work that I do, that I'm not, that it isn't about where's the next job. It's only about the work. And so I've been very fortunate in the last, chunk of years that has been my experience, and I love it. I'm very happy. I'm very fulfilled in that way. And like I said, part of that fulfillment is that I feel like I've done the work. I've earned this. I've paid my dues, as they say.
It's interesting.
By the way, I don't think that paying your dues is a prerequisite. I made a show called Search Party, which was a pretty successful show, generational show. And the writers for that show were students of mine at NYU. And I thought they were really talented, and they deserved an opportunity that they were never going to get because of this notion of paying dues. And so another thing I'd say is I don't believe in that. I don't believe in like, oh, you have to do this for 10 years before you can do that. I mean, that sometimes is what's necessary. But in my case, that's what was necessary. But I'm not someone who feels like you have to work your way up. I go back to, for me, it's just about, do you work hard? Do you have a good attitude? And do you love what you do? I think that's really important, is that you find something that actually fulfills you in some way.
It's interesting.
That could come in lots of different ways. It doesn't have to be all about, that you're making, that you're saving the world or that you're making a lot of money. It could be anything.
It's interesting. I've asked myself the question, is paying dues an absolute requirement at different times of my life? And I don't know where I've come down on that. So it's interesting that you've got an answer for yourself, and that you've actually been able to affect change in places where you did have control over who you were bringing into the team.
Because I wanted those opportunities and wasn't given those opportunities because I hadn't paid my dues. Yeah. So I wanted to pay forward, knowing that people weren't giving me an opportunity because I didn't have the right resume or something like that. And I wanted to not perpetuate that. For me, anybody can do what I do. And so I wanted to practice that. I want to be that person who I needed when I was struggling. I want to be for someone else, someone that would have been great if I'd had that person when I was going through my struggles, who will just give you a chance, who will take you seriously, who will validate you, and validate your point of view and all of those different things. And I do remember in high school and in college, people would come, whether it was career day or some person comes and gives a speech, and it's like the speech is all about how you'll never get to where I am because the speech feels like it's all about telling you that you'll never get where they got. It's all about how hard it was to get there and how cutthroat or whatever and how competitive, and all of those things are true. But I always felt like that doesn't make me, you're just trying to tell me I can't do this. And I don't believe that. I believe that people can do whatever they want. But it's always going to take work and patience. It's never going to just happen for free. Although sometimes it does, and then it goes away, or maybe someone you get lucky. But anyway.
So what donut are you taking right now? And I know you have a complex industry, so whatever comes to mind for you, whatever you can talk about, what's in progress for you?
I mean, I have all my projects that I'm working on. I feel like I'm challenging myself as a filmmaker to expand my craft and do things that I'm less comfortable with. Like, this is very granular, but this last movie that I just directed, this Colleen Hoover movie, Verity, we shot the movie on a different aspect ratio, which is a film nerdy kind of thing, but it's the shape of the screen is like a real rectangle, whereas everything else I've ever done is a square, which may seem like an insignificant difference, but it would sort of be like if you've always painted a painting on a canvas that's a square shape, and then all of a sudden, for the first time in your life, you cut that square in half, and suddenly it was a rectangle. It's like you're looking at a totally different world. And so it was almost like I had to teach myself a new language. And it was so fun. It was so fun. And every movie that I've ever made, there's always a conversation beforehand about what aspect ratio are we going to shoot this movie in. And I always entertain the possibility of shooting in this aspect ratio 2.35, but I always default to 1.85 because it's my comfort zone. And at the end of it, I always go, the next one I'm going to shoot at 2.35. And I finally did. And again, it's about taking risks. It's about always finding something new, some new challenge, some new horizon to conquer, to keep it interesting for me and to keep it alive. And so that jumps to mind. I'm in the middle of editing that movie right now. So this is all so for me, that's what, when I wake up in the morning, that's kind of what I'm thinking about is that project.
It sounds really cool to me because it implies you have to look at the whole world differently, or at least the whole world of the project.
100%.
What a different
100%.
viewpoint to
It's a
take.
totally I mean, it is literally a different lens. It is actually literally a different lens. And so the world looks different through that lens than the lens I'd been looking at it through before. And so you can't just transfer one to the next. You have to step away from it and go, how am I going to do this? Because this is really different. And there were a few kind of hiccups along the way, but I just ended up finding it to be such a wonderful experience.
So, for those who have a donut of their own that they want to take, and this could be anybody from any industry, any age. It could be somebody they still just have the idea for the donut, or it could be somebody who is already en route and they're working on it and they just need some motivation. So let's sprinkle some encouragement. And what would you say to those people?
For me, the encouragement is all about loving the process. That is the common denominator of like everything that I have learned in my path, which is you have to love the process and let go of the result. So if let's say it's a marathon, not a sprint, the journey is the reward, one foot in front of the other. If I think about where I'm trying to get to, if I'm thinking about the pot of gold, so to speak, I get overwhelmed because it seems unobtainable. But if I just focus on what is the next thing that I need to do, what is the next right thing that I need to do, then I'm in the process, and it's not, and I'm enjoying the process of putting it all together one brick at a time. And what I can tell you with absolute certainty is the feeling of accomplishment that you get from doing it that way versus trying to cut a corner or get the quick result or whatever it is. That's the sense of self-esteem you get from that, the sense of self-worth that comes from doing the work for no other reason than that doing the work, doing it well is important, is a reward in itself. Because you look at yourself in the mirror and you know that you showed up for yourself and you showed up for your life, and that you can be proud of yourself and you can be proud of who you are. And for me, that was as as big as much of it as much a part of it as anything else, just the sense of accomplishment. Like if my movie Doris had never been made, I would have never, I still know that I wrote this really good screenplay, and that you could never take that away from me, because I know I know that I did the work. I know that I put in the time, and that gave me a real sense of self-worth. And I think that for me, again, that's another big part of it: self-esteem, feeling good about yourself, and feeling good about um, your your role in the world. And I think that that has to come from action. You need to be the kind of person that you want to be. You need to do it. And but also to accept the things about you that just are the way they are too. A lot of it is accepting I may not ever be this kind of person, or I may not ever be that kind of person. But you know, I love the process. And I think that's been a big help to me, because I see other people that get frustrated with the process, that get impatient with the process. And I feel like it's important to understand that the process is everything to getting the thing that you're looking for the right way.
I don't know who else needed to hear that, but there's some stuff in there that I especially needed to hear right now. So thank you. For those who want to follow you on your journey, uh, where can they find you? What link should I put in the description? Or maybe that's your company.
Maybe my company, I think we might have some Instagram page or something, but we're not big on social media. You can always Google me. I have, like I said, I have a movie that's coming out. In a lot of my work is stuff that I've directed now. So I directed a Christmas movie that's going to be coming out in December with Michelle Pfeiffer and an amazing cast of actors. And then in next year, maybe this year, but probably next year, this Colleen Hoover thriller called Verity, which I'm really excited about. So yeah, maybe just, I don't know, if you feel like it, you could Google me every once in a while and see what I'm up to.
Well, what I'll do, I'll put in the description, I'll put your IMDb page for sure.
Yeah,
And then
perfect.
I do think Semi-Formal Productions has an Instagram account. So
Yes, they do.
whatever links I find, I will put them in the description to make it easy for
Wonderful.
people. But we know what projects to be looking for. And everybody be sure to check out those resources. And if you liked
And you're doing a
hearing,
good thing. This is really good. You're doing a good thing. I commend you for this. This is great.
thank you so much.
Uh, I would have loved to have checked in and watched this back in the day. I would have really appreciated hearing other people trying to work through the similar kinds of things that I was trying to work through. But at that time, there really weren't these kinds of outlets.
You just never know who's going to say something that you deeply connect to. And it could be just because you heard it today. Like you just never know what mood something is catching you in. So I so appreciate that you were open to doing this, and that you were open to sharing your stories and your journey with us. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
And to everybody who's watching this, you know what to do. Go out there, get inspiration, and get donuts. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Melissa.